Today's episode is brought to you by Digits and Threads. Digits and Threads is the member-supported online magazine for Canadian fiber and textile arts. No matter where in the world you are, there's something crafty in the Great White North for you. Use the code ALLIANCE for 10% off your first year at digitsandthreads.ca. Thank you so much, Digits and Threads. And now, here's the show. Welcome to episode 191 of the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals where you can strengthen your creative business, stay up to date on industry news, and build connections within our supportive trade association. Check it out at craftindustrialliance.org. Today on the show, we're talking about creating an inclusive craft community with my guest, Cecilia Nelson-Hurt. Cecilia is a proud Afro-Latina who was taught to crochet as a child by her grandma Sophie and learned to knit many years later. Known to many in the fiber community as Creative Ceci, she is a global knitting and crochet enthusiast. Ceci is a diversity and inclusion practitioner for the global brand L'Oreal and has over 15 years experience developing and executing initiatives to create an equal opportunity workplace. She leverages her training and experience as a speaker at many fiber events and is also an inaugural member of the Vogue Knitting Live Diversity Advisory Council and on the board of Knit the Rainbow, an organization founded to provide knitted garments, crafting instruction, and support to homeless LGBTQ plus youth. Ceci loves to travel and ensures she visits a yarn shop wherever she goes. To date, she's visited over 150 shops, both across the USA and internationally. Ceci, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Yeah, it's great to talk with you. And I'd love to kind of start back. I know you learned to crochet from your grandma, as you mentioned in the intro. Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and what your parents did for work when you were a child.
Sure. So I grew up here in New York in the five boroughs. And so, my family is from Panama. So my grandmother, my mom, my everyone's from Panama. So I spent a lot of my primary years visiting with my grandfather, because my grandmother and grandfather had separated. So spending time with my grandfather and his new family, my extended a family. And so my funny joke is that my mother, in her effort to assimilate, did not teach me Spanish. And so Spanish was almost like a secret weapon. It's like a secret skill in the house. And so it was how they were able to talk around me, little pictures have big ears, I guess is the saying that they say. But when I would go to Panama, my grandfather was the only person who spoke English in the house, and he would leave for work. And so I have my aunts and uncles. I respect them as my aunts and uncles. And so I learned Spanish that way. And so that's a fun, part of I think that's where I developed my love of travel, going to Panama and then going alone. That was where I spent my summer, and my mother couldn't always take off work to fly me down. So I was traveling alone. It was a different time. But my grandmother was a seamstress. And so my grandmother, when she came from Panama, she had ambitions of doing something in fiber or in fashion, rather, not really, from a textile perspective. And she wasn't able to secure an opportunity. And, she based it on race, the fact that she was Black in the late 50s and couldn't do what she wanted to do, but she could, find other sources of employment. And so she ended up being a seamstress for St. Luke Roosevelt Hospital here in New York. And I remember being very young and visiting her, and it was not, one level below the main level. And it was like a seamstress room. And there were women in there sewing the doctor's coats. And they were literally like that. That's what she did. She was sewing,
yeah.
The doctor. I remember I remember the color's gray, the color's blue, the white, the like minty green. Like, so she was sewing these, I guess, the scrubs as well. I guess that's what they did, right? Until they outsourced them all, or maybe she was just doing repairs. I'm not sure, but that was her role. And she was able to retire. And so, but she did take classes at FIT. And so she learned other sorts of pattern making and like official pattern making. She could always make patterns because she made a lot of my Easter dresses and a lot of my birthday outfits. But she also, did her curtains and her pillows and reupholstered her own love seat. She was quite handy. And so I always say I come from a long line of textile women, because then my mom didn't sew as much. She could, but my mother was really into the aesthetics of cake decorating. So she did like the Wilton. Like when she passed away, I got tons of nibs, tons of things. Like I'm like, okay. And, for a while I did fancy Martha Stewart, like cookies. And then my mother also did floral arrangements. And so so in our culture, like the baby shower, like now they're big baby showers, but for us, that was always a thing, like a big baby shower, the Sweet 16, or for us known as the quinceañera. So when you're 15. And so my mother did like the favors, the things with people's name on it that you would pin on your clothing when you come to an event. So both my mother and grandmother were very textile and crafty. And so there was always fabric and needlepoint and latch hook. There was always something around, right? At one point, my mother was into pottery. So there was always something around. So being precocious and an only child, my grandmother thought I was old enough to learn how to crochet. I might have been 6 or 7. And I didn't do anything fancy, but I knew how to hold a needle, and I could do like a chain, and I could do different things. And then I remember getting the famous pot holder kit with the loops.
Oh yeah, totally. We still have them. Yep. Yeah.
Yes, right. I actually saw that Pearl Soho was selling them. I was like,
I know they're back.
I'm like, but outside of pot holders, what? Okay, I don't know what you would do. I mean, you can make pot holders and trivets, and then you're done. Yeah. Unless somebody's very creative and they come up with maybe like placemats if you connect them. I don't know. But I got the pot holder kit, and everyone in our little building where we live got pot holders. In their colors, right? If you read them, and then I got fancy, doing like 3 color, like 2 colors, and weaving them in and different things. Like that was my thing. Mm-hmm. And then I moved away from fiber. I outside, like after I made my Barbie clothes, then I was kind of, that was it. Because I didn't know how to make anything, right? So I didn't know how to make like a hat or a scarf or a cowl to keep me engaged in it. And so I moved away from fiber, but it was always there.
Yeah. So what did you go on to study when you went to college, or what did you think you were going to do professionally, as when you were growing up?
Yeah. So professionally, I think my earliest thing, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, like 6th grade. I was thinking law, right? I was reading books about, early introduction to law, To Kill a Mockingbird and things like that, right? And so I thought lawyer. But then by the time I got to high school, I participated in Junior Achievement, which is a program where I support it now in my day job, right? And so Junior Achievement sends corporate people to various schools, so high schools, and you're part of this Junior Achievement cohort, and you get an assignment, and you can run for election in your cohort group. And so I ended up being the vice president of marketing in our cohort group, and we had these little things. I don't even know what to call it. It was it was a container, but it was tiered containers, and not very, very fancy. And like basically, if it was around now, kniters would use it to hold our stitch markers. Like you would have stitch markers on one level and pins on another level. It was like a 5-tiered little thing about the size of a can of soda, and that was our thing that we had to sell. And so we had to market it, and then we had to like plan, like, this is how much it costs, how much can we sell it for, what do we want to call it? And I don't remember what we called it. I just remember that was in charge of marketing. You think I'd remember that piece. And then the big event was that we got to go to the office where the people who were our sponsors worked, and it was Pfizer. And so, remember, I said that my grandmother worked in a hospital, my mother worked in a hospital, and my stepfather worked in a hospital. So I did not go into a office unless it was a doctor's office. But doing junior achievement was my first time going into a corporate office. And I remember it so clearly, coming in with our little group and getting our badge and going up the escalator and the elevator. And we set up our stations outside of their cafeteria. And it was, again, I learned that the company was sponsoring several other groups of junior achievement kids. And so here we all are, and we all have our tables, and it's kind of like a flea market. But we each were selling our items to the Pfizer employees. And that was like my first corporate experience, my first, if you want to call it that. But from that, I was like, oh, I think I really want to be a marketer.
Wow. And then, that's so great. Yeah.
And then follow that with, watching shows like Bewitch. Her husband worked in marketing. Right. And I'm like, I could be like Darren. I could do what Darren's doing. Right. Gosh. And so I thought that marketing, and again, I was watching, I'm a child of the 70s. Right. And so like Doris Day and all those movies, and there was always a marketing movie. And so again, I thought I could be in marketing. And so that was my ambition. By the time I got to college, I don't know if I had moved away from marketing. I think it was in the back of my mind. And then I decided to major in marketing. And so my undergrad degree is in international marketing, because again, here's that international travel theme, right? And so I was thinking about like not just marketing for the, for America. I was thinking about working for a global company where we would market in other parts of the world. I knew I wanted to travel. So these are all the things that, as I sit back now, I realize that that thread was consistent. And so that was super cool. My ambition.
I love that. And I love that formative story too. And so, okay. So when you came out of college, what sort of, I know like there was a path that led you to L'Oreal USA and to the specific role that you hold there, working in diversity and inclusion. And so I just wonder if you can kind of trace the path, because it's an interesting thing to think about. Like how do you get where you are right now?
I love, and it's funny because I consider myself a storyteller. And I have a few mentees. And so I tell this story pretty often. So I've gotten good at it, and it's my story. Who else can tell my story better than me? So I actually was a teen mom, right? So I had my daughter at 19 between high school and while in my first year of college. And so I had my daughter, and so I didn't go back to school immediately. I tried to take classes and did a little bit of in and out. And then when I got a job at Chase Manhattan Bank, and I was actually an admin, right? And so I worked because in high school I took typing, right? Typing to the rescue. So I knew how to type at one point, like 95 words a minute on a typewriter. And also in high school, I participated after junior achievement in co-op. And so co-op was where you went to school for a week and you worked for a company for a week. And so I worked for a publishing company for a week. And so once I had my daughter, I had these typing skills. And so I was always able to get a great job. And so great job for my age and for somebody who's not finished with school. And so when I got the job at Chase, I knew I wanted to go back to school. And so I enrolled in Pace University for marketing, and I worked and went to school at the same time.
Wow, that's a lot. Yeah.
And raised my child and cared for an ailing mom.
Wow.
So it took me longer than most, but I graduated with honors.
Wow. Right?
Yeah, I graduated cum laude. And people always ask me, like, how did you do that? And I'm like, when you're doing something, you don't realize that the thing you're doing is hard.
You just
unless somebody, because you're like, I want to finish school. Like I knew that college, finishing college was a part of what would be my story. I knew that was important. And also it's like the immigrant dream, right? My grandmother and my mom, that was like, they wanted me and I wanted myself. And so college was important, and working and caring for my daughter and so forth. And so JP Morgan had Chase merged with JP Morgan. And so at the time, Chase, I use both terms interchangeably, had a management development program. And so this is, and that was my first time. I had never even heard of this. What are you talking about? So like, you hire a college graduate and you put them through training for 18 months. And so you're paying me to learn.
That's amazing.
And
yeah, what a great opportunity.
Right, exactly. And again, I didn't know that. I also didn't know how competitive it was. Right. Because once I found out about the program, I applied. I didn't know that they were also, going to colleges and telling students about it, and everyone is doing these interviews. And so, the team that I worked with, they like read my resume over, they read my cover letter, and I submitted it and I got selected for the interview, and they prepped me for the interview, and thank goodness I did it. And I did well. And so I was part of, maybe it was 27 of us. And my understanding is at one point, the applications were as much as 400.
Wow. Yeah.
400 applications.
Better down. To not know how competitive
Better to not know in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And so, but that really put me on a different path, my career in a different trajectory, because I could have, while working for Chase, just applied for a job and gotten a job and learned. But being in what they call a fast track focus, right? So for 18 months, I did 5 different rotations for 3 months each. So in marketing, finance, and customer service and so forth. And then with training in between. So when I graduated the management development program, I had secured a job as a editorial assistant in one of the bank's roles in their corporate communications team. So now I'm doing marketing,
right?
But I'm not doing marketing in the sense of this is my product and this is the price, and I'm learning more about the role of corporate communications.
Yeah.
And so, one of my dear friends, who's a friend now, was in the class ahead of me, and she was in a really cool role that she was moving out of. And she was like, you've done like intranet development, you do events, you've done this. My job that I'm leaving is perfect for you. It's in university relations, and it's being a campus marketer. And basically it's marketing Chase and JP Morgan on campus. So it's the look and feel of the website, the brochures. And so I moved into this marketing role, not realizing that this role was in HR.
And right. So the goal when you're marketing on campuses is to recruit new college grads to come and work. Right. We've all been to
do the program like I did, right?
Employment
so you go
right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
So partnering with the career services at various schools.
Right.
And so, like I said, I went through a management development program, but at the time, Chase had like 7 programs. So you can either be trained to work in a branch, or be trained to work in investment banking or commercial banking, or more like the type of role that I went through was more I'm open to other opportunities. And so now I got to be the person on campus, like preparing the marketing for all the groups. And so I'll make a long story short, but during that time, going to these various schools is when I started interviewing, and I learned how to interview, and I learned about the efforts to increase the diversity of the candidates. And so I'm picking up, like nothing is ever wasted. I'm picking up all of these skills, and I'm understanding, like how to interview and how to read a resume. And so I was with JP Morgan for 13 years, and I love, my story is, as I said, I started off as an admin, and I graduated, or I left the company as a VP.
That is an amazing story. And so it's so great that they had a way to help you grow in that position. Like, I think companies so really need to do that, to tap internal talent and train you up. I think that's just brilliant.
So perfect. And so through that, I also, during the time there, I'm learning about mentoring and being mentored and learning about affinity groups. And so I was able to be a leader of an affinity group for their employees of African heritage. And so I left. Now it's officially from JP Morgan. I left the company doing diversity recruiting and MBA recruiting. And because my position was eliminated, as was happening during the 2008, right?
Financial crisis, yeah.
Financial crisis, they're downsizing. And I consulted with the YMCA for the summer. I got a consulting job because now I know a little bit about recruiting and HR. So I know enough to be helpful. And then through my network, I learned that L'Oreal was looking for a diversity recruiter focused on MBA recruiting. And I'm like, that's exactly what I just did. And so I was the ideal candidate because I knew all the terms. I knew everything. The only thing I didn't know was how to interview for a marketing company versus interviewing for a bank. But I was, I went to school for marketing. So again, so that's how I ended. That's how I got to L'Oreal.
I want to take a moment now to hear from our sponsor, Digits and Threads, and one of the co-founders of Digits and Threads, Kim Worker.
My name is Kim Worker, and I'm the co-founder and publisher at digitsandthreads.ca.
And what is Digits and Threads?
Digits and Threads is the online magazine for Canadian fiber and textile arts, crafts, and industry. We publish several times a month articles and stories about Canadians making things in fiber and textiles, both from historic traditions and contemporary practices. We're essentially telling Canadian stories that Canadians want to hear and that people in the rest of the world want to learn about coming from Canada.
That's great. And can you give us some examples of some recent stories that have been interesting or we might want to check out?
Sure. We have loved reaching out to writers across Canada to write about stories that relate to their own traditions. We have heard from an expert in Indigenous bead traditions who is doing her PhD work on this and has explored her own personal history and traditions of beading, and also those across Indigenous communities in Canada and the US. We have worked with an Inuit writer who wrote about a gallery exhibition of decades in the past Inuit textile work. And what was so great about that was hearing the pride that she felt seeing the traditions of her people reflected in this gallery. And so we love working with writers who are emerging, whose voices we might not have heard before, especially those who are writing about their own perspectives in a way that nobody else could share them. And so that's the kind of work that we're doing. And we're also publishing embroidery patterns, cross-stitch patterns, knitting patterns, crochet. So we're multi-craftual, exploring fiber and textile arts in Canada.
That sounds so fantastic. So tell people where they can go to check this out and learn more.
Sure. We are an independent, member-supported online magazine at digitsandthreads.ca, and listeners can enjoy 10% off their first year using the code ALLIANCE.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Kim.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Digits and Threads. And now back to my conversation with Cecilia.
This summer will make 13 years with L'Oreal. I spent time doing diversity recruiting. I spent time in an HR capacity. I'm not an HR professional, but I spent time in that HR role. And I guess you would say I'm an HR professional because recruiting is an HR function. And then I moved into the diversity and inclusion space about 6 years ago.
Nice. That's so great. I thank you so much for telling us this whole path. I think it's fascinating to see how people get where they are. So I think I really appreciate that. And so it sounds like, were you knitting all along, or what was the knitting part of your life? Like,
the knitting
you had crafting as a child, but you kind of left it behind for a while. So how did you come back to yarn and knitting or knitting and crochet?
It's so perfect, right? Because I think I graduated the JP Morgan program in the beginning of 2001, right? So the same year, September 11th. My mom is still alive at this time, and my mom is very sick. And in cleaning her house, I came across a bag of yarn. and she had started a crocheted something. And I was like, hey, I remember this stitch. And I played around with it. I don't even know what she might be making a vest or something. I just played around with the stitch. And wow, it's like riding a bike, right? Once you pick it up, it just comes right back. And at the same season, I ran into a girlfriend on the subway who was wearing a scarf I was like, oh, let me look at that scarf. And we're on the train and her scarf is a double crocheted scarf. And so I go to Michael's and I get some yarn and then I replicate her scarf. And that became the holiday gift that all my friends got, until one day I was in Banana Republic and saw that I had co-opted so the scarf that my friend had was clearly the Banana Republic scarf that I had co-opted and created it and was giving it out as a Christmas gift. And so I was like, oh, I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed this yarn. And then I started reading about, Friday Night Knitting, the book, and that Julia Roberts was knitting and this, all the celebrities who were knitting. And I'm like, I think I want to learn how to knit. And so in my mind was the seed that I want to learn how to knit. And then September 11th happened. And so I'm now a recruiter. I travel. And September 11th happened and I have to fly and I'm nervous. And I was like, I was going away for a weekend. Let me go to learn how to knit. And so I went to a yarn shop. They literally gave me a book and yarn and needles. And she didn't even in full disclosure, I was there on lunch, so I didn't have time for her to teach me. But she was like, it's pretty simple. The book, wasn't even YouTube, just had pictures. And I taught myself how to knit. And then the weekend I was going away to Vermont, there was a yarn shop in Vermont. And so I stopped in the yarn shop. And because you're teaching yourself, you don't know, right? So I didn't know that I should probably do a garter thing. I did stockinette because the picture said, this is knit and this is purl. And so I knit one row and I purl one row. I never switched it, but I did twist my stitches. So when I have the project that I made, and in the yarn shop, the woman was like, oh no, I think I might've been either like wrapping wrong or going in wrong. And she corrected my stitch. And that was the beginning of the end.
Wow.
I came back home. I went to a yarn shop. I got a project. And, again, I mentioned September 11th because I developed a fear of flying, but I'm a recruiter and I have to fly. I have to fly on little planes to go to Ithaca, to go to Cornell. And so what got me through that was knitting. I'd never had my needles taken away on any flight. Thank goodness, because I would cry. Yeah. And so knitting got me through my fear of flying. And so that's how knitting came back into my life. And then within my first year of knitting, and so knitting for me, 2001, 2002 is an individual activity. I don't know anyone who knits outside of the people who I see at the yarn shop. And then I met somebody on the bus and we started talking, and that was my first fiber friend. And we went to our first fiber event and we found out about Rhinebeck, and, we went to Rhinebeck on a bus tour. And then I joined, Sit and Knit New York through the meetup groups, and I met my fiber friends who are my friends now.
Wow.
And so now I'm seeing there's this whole community and a subculture.
Yeah.
And I love it so much that before I knew that I would, leverage knitting the world, I was going to all these school towns. And I'm like, is there a yarn shop here in Michigan near the University of Michigan? Oh, it's over. There's a yarn shop. And so I would go to yarn shops. And so since recruiting and knitting, and I had time, between the events, I would find a yarn shop. And that's when the yarn shop count started, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so you've been to, as we said in the introduction, like 150 or more yarn shops because
it's
of this.
Definitely, yeah.
It's probably more at this point. I mean, obviously COVID put a damper on the travel, but I'm sure it'll come back and even more will add up. And so I wondered, I was thinking to myself, if I had been to that many yarn shops, I probably would have things that I've sort of learned or noticed shop to shop to shop, sort of. I don't know. I wondered if you have any reflections on what you've come to know about yarn shops from all of those visits.
Absolutely. You can tell in the first 90 seconds if you want to spend time there. The second you walk in, it's kind of like if you go to a department store and not so much a department store, but if you go to a small little shop or boutique and no one greets you and there are people there, right? And so I've learned very early about being made to feel welcomed.
Yeah.
And so walking into a space and, I'm either going at lunchtime or at the end of the day. So I'm not going when it's not a busy time. So there's always people there, right? Always people at the table, whatever. And so if no one makes me feel welcome, I usually don't have a good experience in that yarn shop.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And again, I haven't had.
What is making you feel welcome? Like, what do they do?
It's welcoming. And because I'm traveling, right. And because I'm coming in, it's, hi, how are you? How can I help you? Are you looking for something? Just asking me or just saying, because every yarn shop is different. And so you don't assume that I know where you're fingering, your sport weight, your bulky. So you have to speak to me. You can't just let me. You can't just let me come in and wander. Yes, you can let me wander, but typically you just give me a lay of the land. Oh, hi, we're here. You're looking for anything special? Just let me know. You're free to look around. I'm right here if you need me, right? So you don't have to follow me around,
right?
But just let me know that I can, that you'll be the person, or you could ask anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so the shops that I tend to fall in love with are the shops where people do that, where they acknowledge you, they welcome you, they, stay close enough that if you have a question, or they don't make you feel like you're bothering them if you have a question. Because I've gotten that too.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I'm like, okay, ma'am, but you work here. And so, yes, you're knitting because you work here and, there's nobody bothering you. But if I have a question, I shouldn't be made to feel, and so the elephant in the room is always when I don't get the service I think I should get, I try to figure out why. And as people, and I teach this at work, when someone doesn't treat you the way you think you should be treated, you go to your dimension of diversity. Are they treating me this way because I'm a man and this is a yarn shop and they think that only women should be here? They treated me this way because I look like I can't afford the yarn in here, and that could be any race and any gender, and then are they treating me this way because I'm Black, right? And so you have to go there, and if there are no other Black people in the shop, you're like, all right, what's going on? And then you pay attention to see the next person. How do they treat that person? Mm-hmm. And if they treat that person differently, and that person doesn't look like you, then you have to go to, okay, it's because of this, and it may or may not be. And, people will never admit like, well, yeah, I treated you differently because you were Black. Right. So I have to walk away with that. And there've been times when, I remember this shop in Manhattan, it's no longer there. So, and the woman was so just cold. And, I started teaching people how to knit at work, and I sent them to the shop. And then when they come back, I'm like, how did you feel when you went there? And then my friends, different races, different genders, was like, yeah, they weren't nice. I was like, okay, so the store is not nice.
Right. And there are stores like that. Or,
valid.
Right. Or where they're like, they have kind of a club feel where they're with their buddies and they don't want to like
feel, not even a club.
Yeah. I've been to stores like that too. And it's like, that's not the way to run a store. So interesting. And so this hobby was developing. You were going to these stores, having these experiences, and then kind of Ravelry and then Instagram come along and you start participating there, I'm assuming. And,
yes.
And what did you notice about kind of the fiber community as a whole? Did you have those same diversity questions or at all coming up, or was it not real? Was it sort of more latent, the online sort of culture?
So, I definitely noticed the lack of, but because I'm intentional, right? So I've always been very intentional. And so because I belong to, remember I mentioned the meetup group. So the sit and knit group was diverse, right? So I'm curating And then, I'm meeting other women of color. I'm meeting Hispanic women and Asian women. And so I'm curating my own group of people, my fiber friends, you can call them now.
Right.
But I am noticing certain groups that I'm like, there's not a lot of diversity there. Certain experiences. There's, I've been to Edinburgh 3 times, and I can definitely say from time 1 to time 3, I've saw a tremendous increase in people of color. Probably the first time I went, myself and my 2 friends, and definitely absolutely less than 10 people that I saw. Right. And again, I don't know if somebody is interracial, I don't know. Right. But I'm saying visibly compared to the last time that I was there, when I just felt different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So over time, you see an evolution. So for me, I definitely noticed that, there was a lack before, I don't know what year I would attribute it to, but I didn't see a lot of Black, BIPOC. It's not just Black for me now. It's BIPOC designers, right? I'm not seeing, when you pick up the magazines, you're not seeing a lot of diversity of age and shape and gender. I wasn't, so that all came about later,
mm-hmm.
right? But we moved through the space, and it's people people are voicing it and they're talking about it, but in many ways it was just like, okay, you create your own space, right? So if it's not, if there's not a seat at the table, you build one, or you build your own table. And so that was a lot of what was happening.
Yeah, and you've really begun or have now taken a leadership role in talking about diversity and inclusion in the fiber industry, just moderating panels, speaking on panels, teaching, and then serving on various boards and things like that. So I wonder when, or was there for you a moment when you realized, wait a minute, some of my professional expertise could come to bear here and could really be of service?
Absolutely. And thank you. And so one thing, I'm very cognizant of the leader term, right? And so I definitely say that I'm one of the voices, right? I don't think I'm definitely not the only one. And I don't think I was not the first person,
sure.
Right? And so I'm very intentional to acknowledge the others. But for me, I think, January 2019, the same as everyone else, right? When the major reckoning happened, like I had been aware, but I wasn't vocal. I wasn't talking about it. There were others who were talking about it way before January 2019. I was not. I was doing my work. I was doing my professional work and existing in this space and being aware of when I was made to feel different. And so January 2019, as everyone it's the reckoning. And so as everyone is saying, hey, I haven't been made to feel welcome, and this is how I was treated, and this is what I don't see. And then people started saying a lot of things. And so I was like, you know what? At first I wasn't going to speak. And I remember the night so clearly. I was like, I wasn't going to say anything. Then I was like, wait, you know what? I think I have something to say. And I did an Instagram live, and I talked about, it's not diversity bingo. I was explaining terms because people were getting lost in the terms. Like people were saying, well, people are using the term white supremacy, and that feels very extreme. And so a white supremacist is extreme, right? White supremacy is the systemic racism that attributes preferential experiences based on the proximity to whiteness, right? Still a danger, but not, again, it's interconnected, right? And so I just wanted to explain what that meant. And so people were like, oh, well, you should do this to get a Black person and do this to get a Hispanic person. I said, well, that's diversity bingo. And we don't do that. That's tokenism. And so I explained what tokenism was. And so I just started talking about it. because it's what I do at work. I lead diversity education for my company. And so I spend my day facilitating the conversations around unconscious bias and microaggressions and all the things that we're now having candid conversations in the fiber community. And there are many people who were shocked and bothered by it. But I'm like, first of all, we're a microcosm of society.
I always say we are a microcosm of society.
We're a microcosm of society, right? Yes. And so if there's something bubbling in society, it's going to come. It's going to show up. We're not separate. It's kind of like COVID, right? Like once COVID was out there, if you're moving through society, you're susceptible. Right. And so bias, right? If you're moving through the world, you're going to grow up with bias. We all have them. It's being aware of them and being intentional. And so I just wanted to talk about it. And so, I really think there were a few people in the beginning who gave me the opportunity to, Brooklyn Boy Knits was doing a lecture at Indy City, and he invited me to talk about diversity. And that was like probably my first time doing a presentation outside of work. Christy Glass Knits invited me and the others to come, so Gigi and of Gigi Made It and Felicia of Strengthing and Lewis to have a conversation. And so, that was us being recorded, just talking about what's happening and talking about our experiences. And then I was like talking about the technical terms and the explanation. And then I look back and I can't even believe like the amount of opportunities that I've been presented with, to really be able to voice. And I've been able to develop an intentional curriculum that speaks to, because I can't just take my work presentation and say, here's a presentation that I give about, bias in recruiting and bias as a manager and microaggressions on your team. But we know that bias happens. So how do we talk about it in the fiber space?
Right.
How do we talk about the microaggressions that people experience when they go to a festival or they go to a yarn shop? And, the assumptions that you make when you see someone that they can't afford the thing, right? It's the same behavior. It just shows up different. And so I've been blessed with the opportunities. And again, I go back to nothing is ever wasted, because I'm traveling. And so now I get to really draw upon, I've gone to countries where I don't speak the language. I do not speak a lick of German. Right. And I've been in yarn shops where they speak enough English and we speak yarn. Yeah. And I've had amazing experiences, and I didn't feel like I was a bother. I didn't feel, I was made to feel welcome, whether I'm in Paris or in Italy, Vienna, in Austria, in Portugal. I've been to yarn stores and I've been made to feel welcome.
Right. Right. And you've done a good deal now of public speaking as a result of this combined set of experiences and talents and expertise in the knitting world. And I wondered whether public speaking was something that kind of came naturally to you, or whether that was something you had to grow into, and how has that been?
So it's definitely, it's funny. That's something that I've always talked about and struggled with, because as a child, I had a speech impediment and occasionally I do stutter. And so I've learned how to cope with my stutter when it wants to show up. And so, but ever since I took my friend's opportunity at Chase, I was in roles where I had to public speak. I'm delivering the presentation on campus. And so I for years fought with the battle of, I hate public speaking. It's the thing I have to do because it's my job. I don't love it. I don't enjoy it. But I've switched that narrative. And I've learned very early with students, they don't know what you're going to say, Cecilia. So just, you're the person with the information. And so I've worked really hard on overcoming my so-called fear of public speaking. I've worked on owning the room. I've taken classes on how to own the room and how to be a really good skilled facilitator. And so again, I go back to, it's going to sound like a broken record, but that nothing is ever wasted. And so all of the professional development to prepare me to deliver my content at work, I was able to leverage. The thing that I learned and I finally listened to, it probably was a skill that I've always had. And I say that because when I was going through the management development program, we had to take a presentation class. And I remember being with my group, and one of the assignments was you had to give yourself a score. You had to present, and you had to give yourself a score on how you did, and everyone else had to give you a score. And then you shared your score. And I remember I gave myself a 6 or 5. The class gave me a 9. The average was 8 and 9s. And I'm like, okay, how am I seeing myself as a 5 or a 6, but you all are seeing me as an 8 or a 9? So then I was like, this is in my head.
Right. It's so much of it is in our heads, but that's a very valuable way to get out of it, is just to see how you're rating yourself and see how others are rating you. That's great. Yeah. Yeah. So good. And so I know you are on the Vogue Knitting Diversity Council, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about the role of that council and the work that you're doing together, because I so admire that council. And I think it's maybe a model for other businesses as well. And so if they could hear a little bit about how it works, that might be inspirational.
Absolutely. So there are 8 of us who are on the Vogue Diversity Council. We come from a variety of backgrounds. So from a diversity dimension perspective, our intersections are vast, right? I don't think we have everything covered, so they didn't, but we have the major ways of being. So there's a knitter, a designer, a yarn shop owner. We all play a different role in the community. So starting with our role, and then there are people who are in the UK. There's some here. So we're scattered. So we all have different roles that we play in the community as well. Right. So our passions are vast, and then we all have different dimensions from an identity perspective, male, female, our ages, our abilities, and so forth. And so we collectively, when we come together, we make up a pretty good minor microcosm of the community. And so what I love about us is that each of us challenges the other on, well, did you think about this from an accessibility perspective? Did you think about this from a gender perspective? Because, even with the best intentions, if you're not a part of the community that you're focused on, your blind spot might not allow you to see it.
That's right.
Right. So it's not until you have foot surgery and you have to walk with the cast, you realize how hard it is to navigate.
Yeah.
Right. It's not until you have eye surgery and your vision is impaired, you realize how tiny letters are. Right. And so having the 8 of us, and we all have different perspectives, is that it's like, well, no, Cecilia, that presentation that you did, actually, if somebody has a vision impairment, it's not enough context between or contrast between the presentation page and your font. Your font is too small. Things that I wouldn't, it looks okay to me, or I think it does, right? So it's very good to have that checks and balances. And so we've been able to apply that methodology to the Vogue experience, right? So what is the Vogue experience like for somebody with high anxiety stress, who it's a busy floor? Where can they step away and go to a quiet room? What should that quiet room experience be like? Or what if you're there and you're in a wheelchair? The walkways, are they wide enough to accommodate a wheelchair? What if you move slow? Maybe you might want to come in an hour before everyone else, or move slower, I should say, right? And you need more time. And so those are things that if you're, me, I'm pretty fast. I can navigate, dodge in and out right now. Right. In 5 or 10 years, I might be like, can I come in at 8 o'clock? Right. And so having that perspective to the Vogue experience and looking at the makeup of teachers, there's an opportunity for more diversity in the teachers, opportunity for more diversity in the vendors. Let's look at the fashion show. Like, let's showcase up and coming people. What's the process to become a teacher? Like, how does someone, become, right? And so we get to look at all of that from all sorts of angles to create a more inclusive VKL or virtual, or now it's virtual now, but a more inclusive experience. And so I think the culmination of our first 6 or 7 months as a group would be the last year Vogue, the 10th anniversary Vogue New York at the Marriott Marquis. So that was our, first big Vogue since being a diversity council. And the experience was so different. We've had so many people come up to us or comment, thank you for the extra time. Thank you for the seat. It's one thing to say, okay, this is wheelchair seating, but that, or person who needs, the aisle seat, but they're with a friend. So why not have a seat for their friend? It's the things you start to think about that I think really made a difference in that Vogue experience. Yeah. And then now we get to work with Nora Gon and the editorial committee to look at the magazine.
Right.
And so the magazine looks different. And our ambition as a collective diversity advisory council was to create sustainable change, was to create stuff that would be able to live on after us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that role, just to clarify, that's a paid position, correct? Doing that.
Yes. So there is a honorary, I don't know if it's an honorarium.
There's some,
but yes, there's something. We are compensated. Yes.
Yeah. I think that's great, because you are lending your expertise and your know-how to help improve an organization. So I think that's really great. And before we get to your recommendations, which we're going to do in just a moment, I wondered if you would tell us just a little bit about Knitting the Rainbow, because I think that's such a neat organization and maybe people would like to hear more about it.
Sure. I was so excited to join. So Austin Rivers, and that is his real name, so talented, so smart, noticed or was aware of the homeless crisis, particularly from an LGBTQ youth perspective. And in my day job, I also I'd like to consider myself an ally. I don't get to call myself that. Others have to call me an ally. But I know that there is a crisis for LGBTQ youth because not every parent is accepting, not every parent is loving, and a lot of parents kick their kids out, really, and home is not safe. And so what Knit the Rainbow does is we know there are these homeless youth, and we know, there are organizations that do provide for them, but the need is greater than what all the organizations can provide. And so in my day work, I learned about, the Ali Forney Center. And I learned that here in New York that they, ride the subways, they ride the A train because it's the longest train ride where they can be on it. Or, they need things like a Dunkin' Donuts gift card that gives them the right back in the day to sit in the space. And so knowing this, what Knit the Rainbow does is provide hand-knitted, handmade accessories to keep them warm. So really, really made with love. That's one focus, right? So it's the collection of garments, of accessories for them. And so we're constantly doing that. The other is we want to be able to, when things open up, teach them. So we're collecting yarn so we can do trade and teaching them. And so, the organization is an official 503C, I believe, is the correct designation. And, while we're starting with the accessories, we want to do more with our partners. We want to have, mentoring and career and academic conversations. And so I'm really, it fell right into my wheelhouse. I said yes to joining the board before Austin was even finished telling me what. I'm like, yes. Yes, it's knitting.
That's great.
It's an underserved community, or it's crafting.
Perfect.
It's an underserved community. I'm happy to be there.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Thank you for telling us about it. So people, and I'll link to it in the show notes so people can get involved. I did want to get to your recommendations before we run out of time. So if it's okay with you, we'll go there now. And you've said that you have been having fun with your passion planner, doing planning and being.
Oh my goodness. There. Yes. Yes. Oh no. So, it's funny. I didn't realize how many crafters were also planners, right? So it's funny. Maybe a month ago, Christina of Chelsea Yarns and Gigi of Gigi Made It and Sophie Sophie is Delphina and Trish of Tie Dye. We through Instagram, we noticed we're all like collecting stickers and our planners. And so we did a planner conversation, and like people came. It was a free Zoom on a Sunday, and we're like, let's see if people show up. And people came, and everyone was talking about their planner. So I'm really in love with my planner. I enjoy having like my Sunday night date with my planner to plan for the week and look over my goals and my, just writing it down, because there's so much that I still would like to do and learn, but you have to write everything down.
Totally.
Right?
And it helps set that intention, and
it helps set the intention.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then you said that you've been enjoying using Canva, which is a digital photo editing program that you can use online for free to sort of make more interesting Instagram posts. Yeah,
I'm trying to get better at it. I'm trying, because I've always loved art, and I still have my high school scrapbooks, right? So I was stickering and scrapbooking and everything. And so I'm really appreciating the aesthetics of what you can create with these digital tools. And so I'm still learning. There's so much that you can do. While finishing school and working at Chase, I did graphics. And so I love graphics and fonts. And so I'm enjoying it.
That's great. Yeah. Yeah. There's lots that you can do there. And then finally, you wanted to recommend journaling as a way to sort of develop your writing skills, and potentially down the road, get ready to write a book, maybe.
I've been thinking more and more about like, what would my book be about? Like what advice could I give? Right. And so, I've been journaling, and also during this time of COVID, right. So I've been really, whether I'm gratitude at the end of the day, or I'm setting my intentions at the beginning of the day, or in my passion planner, I'm looking back over the month at how the month, I'm taking note and I'm documenting this time, because it's been a year. Right. It's been over a year. And so I don't think, and the year is not lost, and there's still things happening, and you want to be able to go back and say, oh, this is how I felt this day. Oh, I remember that. Right. Because in the COVID fog and in the blur that is life, right? It's like life is slow and fast, right? So when you think about what's to come, it feels like it's so long away. But then when it gets here, it's like that went so quickly. And so being able to document, whether it's through photos or through keepsakes or through your journal, I think is so important. And it also helps tell your story.
Yeah.
And
my family
I'm a big advocate.
Yeah. We're making a scrapbook, of a COVID scrapbook. And I agree with you. Just being able to look back with my 3 kids and all that happened to us during this time, it's been really, really helpful. And I think the kids have already been like, who's going to get it later? We got to get copies of it made. And, we kept a lot of things. So I agree with you. It's really important. And we'll want to look back, and know what happened.
It's funny. Yeah. My manager, her mom passed away several years ago, but her mom had kept a journal, and extensive, and she wrote about when she would spend the day with each of her 3 kids, like what that day was like at the end of the day. And so when her mom passed away, she made copies of the journal and gave it to each kid. So each kid could remember that Christmas or that random Saturday. And, you have your understanding of how that day went, but to read what it meant to your mother, right? is so different.
Yeah, totally. That's lovely. Well, Cecilia, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the Craft Industry Alliance podcast.
Me.
Yeah, it was great.
This is so much fun.
I'm so glad. Yeah, it was really great connecting with you. And you've been listening to the Craft Industry Alliance podcast. I'm Abby Glassenberg. Today's episode was brought to you by Digits and Threads. Remember to use the code ALLIANCE for 10% off your first year of Digits and Threads. Enjoy fiber and textile-focused articles and patterns steeped in the diverse traditions and contemporary creations of Canadian makers. Join today at digitsandthreads.ca. Thank you so much, Digits and Threads. Craft Industry Alliance is a community for craft professionals. And when you become a member of Craft Industry Alliance, you get in-depth coverage of craft industry news, the opportunity to connect with fellow professionals for advice and support, and access to an educational library filled with ideas, tools, and resources to help you as you build your business. So join us at craftindustryalliance.org. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.